and welcome to Wellywood Wargaming. My name is Damon and I am here to talk to you about Warcry, actually. Now, why am I talking about Warcry and not Necromunda for once? Well, firstly, as you probably know, if you've listened to the podcast at all, we're branching into other specialist games, and I just want to spread my wings and move away from just being a one-trick pony or a one-system guy. And Warcry, for those that don't know, is one of Games Workshop's specialist games. It is in the Age of Sigmar universe, and it is really... Is it good or is it bad? I guess you're going to have to watch the rest of the video to find out. But really, I just wanted to give my sort of first impressions of the game, of the lore, of the mechanics, of all of the stuff. Just give my 2 cents on it really, maybe compare it to a couple of other systems and just talk about it with you. If you're new to Warcry or if you're an absolute veteran to Warcry, that doesn't matter. Hopefully you can find this video of use or of interest, but really I just wanted to give you my first impressions of the game after playing a handful of games. I have fully fallen head over heels in love with it, if I'm honest, and there are a few reasons why. Now, going back to the beginning of Warcry, of course, it's been going for a few years now. When I first saw Warcry come out, I absolutely loved the look of the miniatures and the aesthetic. I loved the idea that it was all sort of chaos, but the first sort of turn-off, and well, really the only turn-off for me was that it was in the Age of Sigmar universe. And I've got to be honest, I think because I'm an old bastard and because I'm stuck in the past, and I am very bullheaded and very stubborn, I didn't want to accept that Age of Sigmar was going to replace, Warhammer Fantasy, I suppose. And I was kind of upset that Games Workshop had destroyed the world of my childhood and replaced it with something new and shiny, and brought in the Space Marines in different armor and basically made it a very different sort of thing. I didn't, I must say, in my ignorance, look into any of the lore or any of the actual, new stuff that they'd brought in with Age of Sigmar. I just wasn't, frankly, interested. I didn't like the look of it. I didn't like the names of all the stuff. I didn't like the sort of IP thing with them calling orcs orcs and elves and all that shit. It just really, really turned me off. It made my stomach turn. And that put me off Age of Sigmar. But also, of course, when Warcry came out and I saw that it was affiliated to Age of Sigmar, of course, that was also a turn-off. Now, the other thing is, of course, as you probably know, if you've watched any of my other videos, then Necromunda is my sort of one true love. I've also played quite a lot of Blood Bowl, but those are really the two systems that I've played most of for my entire life, really, there or thereabouts. But most recently, Necromunda has been the focus of this channel and has been the focus of pretty much everything I talk about. And most of my gaming time and hobbying time has gone towards Necromunda, running campaigns, painting lots of miniatures and sticking them up on Instagram and whatnot, and talking about them at length for hours and hours and hours on YouTube. So anyway, now having since started the podcast with Glyn and Rob, I have sort of gained new perspectives on things, and the idea behind the entire thing was to branch out and, of course, get into other systems and just see what was going on out there, because obviously I noticed that Warcry was creating a bit of a stir. I'd seen the miniatures that have been consistently amazing. I would say, in fact, quite comfortably, hand on heart, that the Warcry miniatures that are made specifically for the game, the bespoke factions, so to speak, are the best miniatures that Games Workshop have ever produced. Ever. And I know that's a hugely bold statement, but I'd say on average, I don't say it individually, but I think the range of the warbands that you've got for Warcry are stronger than any other range that Games Workshop has put out in terms of its aesthetic. I just think they are fantastic, from Iron Golems to Chaos Legionnaires to Tarantulas Brood. They're all amazing. They've got so much character. They've got so much unique aesthetic, and they're all chaos, which makes it even cooler. Now, where to start with Warcry, I suppose, was another sort of turn-off for me. Now, I don't have a lot of money. I'm not a high earner. I certainly can't afford Australia and New Zealand prices for things. Generally speaking, I have to buy things either second-hand or I wait till I trade sprues with people. I tend to go the cheap route if I can. because I just don't have a lot of money. If I did have lots of money, I'd buy big spangly box sets for $400, but I just cannot afford to do that, like a lot of people that I know. So again, buying a huge starter set like you've had in Warcry, again, was a bit of a stumbling block for me. So I've gone, in terms of how I've got into it so far, it's been pretty simple. I've bought one warband, which has now turned into 2 or 3, and it's been pretty easy because, I mean, firstly, with all the Warcry bespoke warbands that you get the rules and the cards in the box, and that's pretty much ready for you to play. All of the actual core mechanics for the rules are now on the Warhammer or Games Workshop website. So if you want the mechanics and the rules, they're free and you can download them off the website. Any of the other stuff, though, the terrain and whatnot, you can buy in a box set, or you can just make your own. Or like I have done, just use your Necromunda terrain, which is not quite right, but it works, it's fine. But what I'm trying to say is you don't need any of the big box sets to play the game. You don't need all the tokens. The dice are just D6s, and you can use any of your miniatures that you might have from Warhammer Fantasy, from Age of Sigmar, whatnot. So it is actually quite an accessible game. It's much more accessible than Age of Sigmar. It's much more accessible than 40k or any of the other big battle sort of war games where you've got full armies, Horus Heresy, things like that. So it's still a skirmish game, similar to Necromunda or Blood Bowl. You buy one box, and that's pretty much it. It's all you really need. You don't even need unique dice like you do with Blood Bowl and Necromunda. Now, the other thing as well is that your warbands, you don't need to expand on them much either. I mean, you could buy 2 boxes maybe, and then you've got all the options for weapons. But technically, all the rules are in there, and they're all pretty much WYSIWYG as well. But so far, my impressions of Warcry as a game to get into have changed. It did seem fairly inaccessible. It seemed quite expensive at first. It seemed like something that I wasn't going to be interested in lore-wise. But having come round and realised that actually it's pretty easy to get into. The rules are free. You just need a warband, and that's really it. You can use any of the Warhammer Underworlds warbands, which also now have rules for Warcry as well. And if you play Age of Sigmar, you've probably got a bunch of miniatures that you could also make warbands out of as well. So that is the sort of long and short of how accessible it is to get into. Now, there isn't currently a sort of starter box, I don't believe, which does create problems. But again, you don't really need that. All of the rules are available online, like I said, for free through the Games Workshop website. If you want the extra rules, if you want campaign stuff, if you want all of the warbands, in fact, I believe all of the warbands and all of the rules for the warbands individually are PDFs on the Games Workshop website as well. But if not, if you want the other stuff that you can't get through Games Workshop, go to warcry.net. That's a little secret tip for you, but you can do that, and that's got every single thing to do with Warcry on there. It's a fantastic website. Go support that. Anyway, moving into the sort of the other stuff that I want to talk about. So I've played a handful of games with only one warband, the Chaos Legionnaires. And of course, my experience in Warcry so far is very limited. I'm new to the game, but I'm not new to Wargaming. I'm not new to skirmish games. I've played lots of Mordheim. I've played lots of Necromunda. I've played lots of Blood Bowl, all sorts of other shit. But Warcry is very unique, and it's unlike anything I've played so far. I guess when I first sort of picked it up, I thought, I kind of wanted to compare it to Mordheim a bit too much because, it's in a fantasy setting. You've got warbands with perhaps some ranged attacks in bow and arrows, crossbows, things like that. But otherwise, it's pretty much a band of guys with swords and axes and shields running at another band of guys in a fantasy setting and just killing each other. In short. But Warcry is very, very, very different to Mordheim, and I don't think it's fair to draw too many comparisons. The lore is obviously very, very different, but the game mechanics are incredibly different. Now, I would actually compare Mordheim to Necromunda. I'd say those two games are very, very similar in how you play them. But Warcry, the key difference here is simplicity. Warcry is very, very, very simple indeed. In fact, at first, I was kind of almost frustrated by how simple it was. Going through the rules on my laptop here and just seeing what each phase, included, I found that myself and Glyn, who I was playing with the other day, we played 3 or 4 games in a row. We found that we were actually looking for more rules, looking for more mechanics and stuff, and where there weren't any. And do you know what? It's really refreshing. It's really uncluttered. It's really straightforward. It's really streamlined, and it's really simple. However, that doesn't make it a bad game. So far, what I've seen from the game is that, sure, it's really easy to pick up and play. It's really simple to learn the rules, and you can breeze through games in 30 minutes, 45 minutes, as we did after only getting into it the first time. So it's definitely more of a beer and pretzels game than, say, Necromunda. I'd say the typical game of Necromunda is going to cost, going to take you probably easily an hour and a half to 2 hours to play a good, decent, fun game. Some of the other big battle games you're going to spend a lot more time on. But this really is a 45-minute game tops. And that includes setting up all the terrain and everything. It's a smaller size board, so you're generally up in each other's faces earlier, and you've only got 4 turns in every game, which means that every fighter technically has only 8 activations to make in an entire game. So you can play many games in an evening, whereas you can't do that with a lot of other games. So there's a lot more scope for variation, and the way that you can set up a game with the cards is just fantastic. You've got 4 different types of cards. You've got a deployment, you've got a terrain thing, you've got a twist thing, and what's the other one? You've also got, the main, how you win sort of terms of the game as well. Excuse me if I don't know all the terms of those quite yet. But essentially the game is very, very, very simple in its core mechanics. However, what that does mean is that you've got real sort of room and scope for strategy. So even though, like I said, there is less shooting in this game than there are than there is in sort of 40k and Necromunda and stuff, you've still got a lot of real sort of interesting tactical stuff that you can do in the game. And the first thing with the sort of tactical element, I suppose, is activation. So out activating your opponents and whatnot is quite similar to Necromunda in that if you've got more fighters than your opponent, you're going to have more activations. And I think activation economy is probably something, again, forgive me, I'm very new to the game, but I think activation economy is something that I can see as being quite powerful in this game, and usually meaning that you're going to be on top. However, there is lots of nuance within that as well. And the main thing that sets all of the different warbands apart and gives them their own flavor is a set of abilities and special rules. So you've got reactions and you've got abilities, and these abilities are what give your warband their own individual way of playing, and there are so many different warbands that it is just ridiculous. There are so many warbands to choose from. It's fantastic. I don't even know where to start, to be honest. Now that all of the Age of Sigmar factions are, ported into Warcry, it's just fantastic. You can, I've got a Sybarite warband that I'm making at the moment. I've got a Slaves of Darkness warband that I'm making as well. And I don't care about how good they are in the game. I'm making them because I love the miniatures and I love the look of it. But yeah, that's all I really wanted to say about that. The abilities is excellent. The other things that I find unique about the game, and my favorite thing about the mechanics of the game so far, is the initiative phase and how you do that whole first part of a turn. You both players roll 6 dice, and you basically count up how many singles you've got. So repetitions of the same number, how many doubles, how many triples, how many quads, and those you use to trigger your abilities and gain initiative as well. And it's just a really fun, quick, and easy way to do the game. I really love it, and I'm surprised that I haven't seen it in any other games so far. Instead of just rolling a d6 to see who goes first, it's far more interesting. You can snatch initiative away from your opponent, and it really is, really, really cool way of doing things. You've then got wild dice that you can throw in there as well, just to make things even more interesting. The other thing that's quite unique about it, I suppose, as well, comparing it to sort of Mordheim and Necromunda and stuff, is that your warband is separated into 3 little groups, which is pretty cool. You haven't just got one big group and they're not just spread out individually. You've got 3 core groups. You've got your dagger and your hammer and your shield. So you never know, like before the game starts, you've got these three core groups. Then you put down the card to see, you know, where those 3 groups are going to actually be. And it's pretty random. You don't know where your leader's group's going to come on. You don't know where your best guys are going to be. So every game that you play, there's so many possibilities and so many different outcomes for each game. You can't really plan for anything. So having a sort of all-rounder sort of approach to things is definitely really cool. But like I said, you could play like a handful of games in an evening, and all of them could be very, very different outcomes and very, very much quick and fun and bloody and chaotic, and it's just great. So I guess this video really was just to say that I have well and truly fallen head over heels in love with Warcry. I have to admit, it is a fantastic game, and I'm really looking forward to playing more. The other thing I would say as well is I've been looking at some other sort of content out there on YouTube, and there are people that do very similar things to what I do with Necromunda for Warcry and talk about the meta and the mechanics and stuff, and I can see that becoming quite an addictive and sort of interesting part of it. I'm aware that there are tournaments for Warcry. I'm aware that there are definitely meta chasers and people who really do the sort of number crunching and stuff for it. I think I'm definitely going to be more of a narrative player, but I must say the tournament stuff does appeal to me as well. But we'll see how we go, because I must say in the past with tournaments, it has left me with not enjoying games so much. So I think coming at it from a narrative perspective is going to be much more interesting, and going through the sort of campaigns that you've got here in the rules can be really rewarding by the looks of things too. But that's really all I wanted to say. I think the game is in a really good place. Games Workshop are obviously supporting it still. I've just seen the roadmap from Warhammer Fest, and it looks interesting. It's not quite as good as what I'd hoped, but it looks like there is plenty of support this year for Warcry going forwards. And the fact that you've got the sort of implementation from Warhammer Underworlds and Age of Sigmar, and that you can use models, which are frankly amazing models, from both of those games in Warcry as well, is really, really fun and exciting, just to be able to go, oh, I really like the look of those models. Can I use them in Warcry? Absolutely, you can use them in Warcry, and that's fantastic. So really, that's it. That's all I wanted to say. If you haven't played Warcry at all, I strongly advise you to go to warcry.net, look at the rules, download the PDFs from the Games Workshop website for the core mechanics, the core rules, and all the warbands, or just even the warbands that you fancy playing. You know, you might like the look of some orcs. You download the relevant PDF for that, and you're good to go. All you need is a bunch of D6s, quite a lot of them, and maybe a load of D20s as well for wounds and things like that. But it's all you really need in terms of a playing surface. You just use your coffee table. You can use pots and pans if you like for scenery, but it's pretty easy to make your own scenery out of twigs and dried bits of bark and whatnot if you really want to. But I just think that it's quite an easy game to get into. The mechanics are fairly simple. The miniatures are beautiful. What is not to like? I can't see anything that I don't like about it so far. I haven't played the campaign stuff, so we'll see how that goes, but I think that's probably the one area where I will probably want to bring in my own twist on things, because I'm a narrative sort of player, and I like to create my own sort of world and build stuff a little bit more from there. So whether this has that in there or not, it remains to be seen, but it looks like the game is in a very healthy place with a really good community online, and I'm looking forward to engaging with you all of you Warcry folks out there, as well as all my Necromunda peeps. I'm certainly not going to be abandoning Necromunda for Warcry. I'll be playing and loving both, I'm sure, as well as Aeronautica Imperialis, which is something that I've recently got into, but now realise that Games Workshop are probably not going to support anymore, which is very sad, because that's also a fantastic game with some beautiful miniatures as well. But that's it for now. If you got this far through the video, then thank you very much for watching. And long may it continue. Please do check out my Patreon, like, share, subscribe, and all that jazz. And check out the next podcast as well. Will it be about Warcry? Will it be about Mordheim? Who will see? Who will know? Will it be about Kill Team? Could be about anything. I guess you're going to have to find out later on in the month. But in the meantime, bye-bye for now.